The sudden death of Bruce Lee in the summer of 1973 was a tragic event in the history of action cinema.
On July 25th, 1973, thousands of his friends, colleagues, and admirers gathered at the funeral parlor in Kowloon to pay the last respects to the man they had always respected. Police estimated that 300,000 people lined the streets and jammed the funeral parlor to get a last glimpse of their fallen hero.
With the release of his first American picture, Enter the Dragon, right on the heels of Lee's early death, he became a near unprecedented international star. But a lot of mystery and frustration arose in the wake of this incident that wasn't helped in any way by the sudden surge in attempts to cash in on the Bruce Lee fame train. What is known is that Lee was working on several projects at the time of his death. First, Lee was interested in finishing Game of Death, which he had halted to go and do Enter the Dragon. Second, he was setting up a joint production with an international crew to make a movie with George Lazenby, Angela Mao, and Sonny Chiba called Stoner. And last, he was getting ready to do his first swordplay film, and had already done costuming and some location scouting. In China, he went over to the home of a young actress named Betty Ting, who was to be featured in Stoner, with Golden Harvest producer Raymond Chow, and worked a bit on the script, and then Raymond Chow left. That evening, Bruce Lee was supposed to meet at a dinner party with George Lazenby, but never made it. At a 1975 Comic-Con in San Diego, close friend Chuck Norris explained what happened.
Bruce was 32 years old. Let me explain something about his death, too, because there's, I guess, so many rumors that are going about how he passed away and so forth, about touch of death and drugs and so forth. And so I'd like to clarify that before we go on with the demonstration. Is Bruce, in 1968, he's pretty heavy in the weightlifting, as you could tell. He was very well built. And he was lifting weights one night with Kareem Jabbar, who was a student of his when he was in Los Angeles, playing at UCLA. And he tried to lift too heavy weights, and he ruptured the disc in his back, and he was laid up in the hospital for 3 weeks. In fact, the doctor said that they didn't know if he'd be able to walk again or not. But of course, with a person like Bruce, who's got the drive and determination to achieve anything in life, he was up in about a month, and within 3 months, he was as strong as he ever was. But he had constant back pains from that day on, and he was having to take medication to keep the muscles in the back loose and relaxed. So what happened is that when he was in Hong Kong preparing for his next movie, he was working with a girl named Betty, and who was going to co-star with him, and he got a severe headache. So Betty gave him some antibiotics for the headache, and with the medication he had taken for his back and the medication he had taken for his headache, they reacted to each other and made his brain swell up, and it created an aneurysm, or ruptured blood cells in his brain. And that's actually what happened. So if anyone asks you what happened, you can tell them the true story.
The film Stoner was released the following year, minus both Lee and Chiba. And then, much to everyone's surprise, Betty Ting starred in a film about her relationship with Bruce. Bruce Lee and I, not to be confused with Fist of the Unicorn, which is sometimes also called Bruce Lee and I, tells the story of a pretty but troubled young girl, of course played by Betty Ting, who involves herself in the life of married international superstar Bruce Lee, played here charmingly by a young Danny Lee, and the effect he had on her life. It garnered immediate controversy upon its release, as it features a relationship between the two that quickly goes from one of idolization to full-fledged affair by the end. The movie opens with Betty Ting walking on a beach to some sad-ass song and goes into a frankly scandalous sex scene that also features Bruce Lee popping pills like a reverse Pez dispenser and smoking a doobie. Lee dies suddenly, and we see the way in which people in the media and just in general treat Betty and her feelings of guilt and despair. We then go back in time and see how she met Bruce. We see her as a sad young girl that wants the life and glamour of movie stardom, but is tricked and blackmailed by unscrupulous movie producers into being a body double and playing solicitous minor roles. When she attempts to flee, she is cornered and beaten, but that's when she is rescued by a man she doesn't seem to see very clearly. Later, she concludes that it's Bruce Lee and tracks him down to a nightclub, and by playing hard to get, actually manages to involve herself in his life. Betty is completely taken by the strong, good-looking, and philosophical star of Bruce Lee, and to Danny Lee's credit, he comes off so well that so are we, the audience. Lee shows a side of Bruce that is both depthful and human. We see and learn his goals in life, understand the struggles that have helped to make him into the man he is today, though little is shown of the legend he would become. He takes an interest in Betty because she sees in her the same sad circumstances from whence he came, and he feels he can help her. Upon finding out that he is a married man, Ting becomes self-destructive and disappears until Lee tracks her down, and the two begin a rather odd affair. This is where the movie actually does seem a little bit sleazy, as there are loads of sex scenes. I swear I can never watch the final fight in Enter the Dragon again after seeing Betty Ting and Bruce Lee throw pillows at each other on his trampoline bed in front of a wall of mirrors. That being said, an aura of crushing, gut-wrenching sadness hangs over the entire film, so I don't know how you could really enjoy it on that level. The film's flaws are pretty apparent. I'm not sure I've seen too many action movies that try so hard to inject a bunch of cliche action scenes into it and yet still pretend they aren't an action movie. We get multiple kung fu fights and even a couple of car chases, and since I brought up the fights, I should probably mention that they get this aspect of Bruce Lee all wrong. His fights were all about speed and extreme force, which he emphasized by flexing and posing after a power move. This movie is still attempting to inflate Lee's image with acrobatics and fancy spins, which were never really a part of Lee's repertoire. In this respect, the movie becomes dangerously close to becoming just another clone of Bruce Lee movies. What's interesting, though, is that when it comes to the relationship between Lee and Ting, it's not actually very clear whether or not the relationship was actually a physical one. There are several sex scenes to be sure, but within these scenes are flashes of Ting alone, as if she's only fantasizing about them. Not only that, but the scene that opens the movie is shown in a completely different way at the end, with both characters even dressed differently. So it's kind of left up to the audience to pick their own version of events. To be honest, I don't think this is such a bad movie. It's garnered a reputation over the years as a cheap little sleaze picture making a quick buck off the death of a celebrity, but I see it as an honest look at the effect Bruce Lee's death had on a lot of people. Especially Betty Ting, who bore the brunt of the criticism leveled at the movie. Yeah, it gets some basic facts wrong, but she neither wrote nor directed the thing, and it's not like the movie paints her in a bright light either, so I wouldn't know why she would be making this stuff up. But when you look at all the Bruceploitation movies and references and shitty attempts by producers to make an extra buck off the Lee name, is a woman attempting to gain some actual catharsis while admonishing the imposters really so bad?
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they fought